Assalamualaikum and greeting to everyone. My name is Nazliana Birhanuddin. Today I would like to explain on chapter 13 about leaderships. There are 7 objectives for us to learning this chapter. Number 1, we can summarize the conclusions of trait theories of leaderships. Number 2, we can identify the central tenets and main limitation of behavioral theories. The number 3, we can contrast contingency theories of leaderships. Number 4, we'll be able to describe the contemporary theories of leaderships and their relationships to foundational theories. Next, the number 5 of the objective is we'll be able to discuss the role of leadership in creating the ethical organizations. And the number 6, we can describe how leaders can have a positive impact on their organizations through building trust and mentoring. And the last, number 7, we'll be able to identify the challenges to our understanding of leaderships. Leadership is the ability to influence a group towards the achievement of a vision or set of goals. Not all leaders are managers, and even not all managers are leaders. Not allowed leadership is often as important or more important than formal influence. Throughout the history, strong leaders have been described by their traits. Therefore, leadership research has long sought to identify the personality, social, physical, or intellectual attributes that differentiate leaders from non-leaders. Trait theories of leaderships focus on personal qualities and characteristics. A comprehensive review of the leadership literatures, when organized around the Big Five, have found extraversion to be the most predictive traits of effective leaders, but it is more strongly related to the way leaders emerge than to their effectiveness. Unlikely suitability and emotional stability. Accuracy and the openness to the experience also show strong relationships to leaderships, though not quite as strong as extraversions. The good leaders who like being around people, they are be able to enforce themselves, they are disciplined and able to keep commitments they are make and have an apparent advantage when it comes to leaderships. Another trait that may indicate that the effective leadership is emotional intelligence, EI, that discussed in chapter 6. A core component of EI is empathy. Empathic leaders can sense others' needs, listen to what followers says and don't says, and read the reactions of others. A leader who displays and manages emotional effectively will find it easier to influence the feeling of the followers by expressing genuine sympathy for good performance and by showing irritation when employees fail to perform. There are 2 conclusions of trait theories of leaderships. Number 1, the first, we can say that the traits can predict leaderships. Second, traits do a better job predicting the emerge of leaders than distinguish between effective and ineffective leaders. Trait theories help us to predict leaderships, but they don't fully explain leaderships. Now we has come to the second objective of this chapter, is identify the central tenets and main limitation of behavior theories. Behavior theories of leaderships, in contrast, we imply we can train people to be a leaders. The most comprehensive of behavioral theories of leadership resulted from the Ohio State Studies, which found two behaviors that accounted for the most leadership behavior. The number one is initiating structures. A leader defines and structures his or her roles and those of the subordinates to facilitate goal attainment. This behavior of leaders, they will attempt to organize work relationships and goals. A leader high in initiating structures is someone who assigns particular tasks, set the standard of performance and the deadlines. So the second behavior is a leader that high in considerations. This is we can categorize that there are more mutual trust, respect of employees' ideas, and regard for their feelings. A leader in high in considerations help employee with the personal feelings, is a friendly leaderships and approachable. This kind of leaderships, they are treats all employee as equal as possible, and they are more express their appreciations and support. In a simple way, this kind of leader are people oriented. So most of us want to work with this kind of leaders. When we ask to indicated that most motivated employees to work is mentioned that they are searching for this kind of leader with the aspirations behavior. The result of the behavior theory studies have been fairly positive. For example, one review found the followers of leader high in considerations are more satisfied with their jobs, were more motivated, and had more respect for their leaders. But consideration and initiative structures were found to be moderate related to the leader and group performance, along with the rating of leaders' effectiveness. However, from the research of the GLOBES program, a study of 80 leaders from 825 organizations in 62 countries, they found that leaders high in considerations succeed best in the countries where cultures values did not favor unilateral decision making. In general, research indicated there are a variety of both the trait and behavioral theories. Part of the each theories can help explain fact of leadership emerge and effectiveness. However, identifying the abstract leaderships is not a simple task. The first difficulty is in correctly identifying whether a trait or a behavior predicts a certain outcome. The second is in exploring which combinations of traits and behaviors yield certain outcomes. The third challenge is to determine the causality of traits to behaviors so that predictions towards desirable leadership outcomes can be made. As important as traits and behaviors are in identifying effective or ineffective leaders, they do not guarantee success. Some leaders may have the right traits or display the right behavior and still fail. Context matters too, which have given rise the contingency theories that we will discuss next. Now we are arrived at the third objective on this chapter. Contrast contingency theories of leaderships. Some leaders seem to gain a lot of admirers when they are taking over struggling companies and lead them out of crisis. However, predicting leadership success is the more complex than finding a few heroes to help lift the organization out of the mine. Also, the leadership style that work in tough times doesn't necessarily translate a long-term success. According to Fred Frieder, it appears that under conditions A, leadership style X will be appropriate, whether style Y will be more suitable for conditions B and style Z for condition C. But what we will condition A, B, and C, we will consider the feeder model, which one approach to isolating situational variables. The feeder model is the first developed comprehensive contingency model for the leaderships. The feeder contingency model proposed that group performance depends on the proper mesh between the leader styles and the degree to which the situation given to the leader's controls. According to this model, the individual's leadership style is assumed to be stable or permanent. The least preferred coworker LPC questionnaire identify whether a person is task-oriented or relationships-oriented by asking respondents to think all of the co-workers they have ever had and describe the one they least enjoy working with. If you describe this person is favorable terms, a high LPC score, you are relationship oriented. If you see your least preferred coworker is unfavorable terms, that is a low LPC score. You are primarily interested in productivity and task oriented. After finding a score, a fit must be found between the organizational situation and the leader style for there are to be a leadership effectiveness. We can assess the situation in terms of three contingency or situational dimensions. That is number one, leader member relations is the degree of confidence, trust, and respect that members have in their leader. Number two, task structure is the degree to which the job assignments are regimented, that is structured and unstructured. And the last, number three, is position power is the degree in influence a leader has over power variable such as hiring, firing, disciplining, promotion and salary increases. According to the freedom model, the higher the task structure, the more procedures are added, and the stronger the position power, there there are more control the leader has. We can see from this exhibit 13-1. Situational leadership theory, SLT, focus on the followers. It said that successful leaderships depends on selecting the right leadership style contingent on the followers' readiness, the extent to which followers are willing and able to accomplish a specific task. A leader should choose one of four behavior depending on the follower readiness. If the follower are able and unwilling to do a task, A leader needs to give a clear and specific direction. If they are unable but willing, the leader needs to display a high task orientation to compensate for followers' lack of ability, and high relationships orientations to get them to accept the leader's desires. If the followers are able but unwilling, the leaders needs to use a supportive and participative style. If they are both unable and willing, the leaders doesn't need do so much. Path goal theory extract elements from the research on initiating structures and considerations, and on the expectancy theory of motivations. Path goal theory suggests that it's the leader's jobs to provide followers with informations, supports, or other resources necessary to achieve any goals. The term path goals implies effective leaders clarify followers' path to their work goals and make the journey easier by reducing roadblocks. The theory predicts uh, three followings uh, leaderships. One, direct directive leaderships yield greater employee satisfactions when tasks are ambiguous or stressful than when they are highly structured and well laid out. Number two, supportive leaders result in a high employee performance and satisfactions when employees are performing structured tasks. Number three, direct leadership is likely to be perceived as redundant among employees with a high ability or considerable experience. The final contingency theory we are argues that the way the leaders make decision is as important as what he or his decides. The leader participations model related leadership's behavior to subordinate participants in the decision making. Like path goal theory, it says that leader behavior must adjust to reflect the task structures, such as routine, non-routine, or in between. But it does not cover all leadership behaviors, and it's limited to recommending what type of decisions might be the best made with subordinate participant. It lays groundwork for the situation and leadership's behavior most likely to elicit acceptance from subordinates. As one leadership scholar noted that leaders do not exist in a vacuum. Leadership is a symbiotic relationship between leaders and the followers. This is the OB pool uh, of a survey of 700 respondents. How are you developing your leadership skills? Now we are at the fourth objective on this chapter, which is describe the contemporary theories of leaderships and their relationships to the foundational theories. Leaders are important to the organizations and important to the employees. The understanding of leaderships is constantly evolving science. Contemporary theories have been built on the foundations we have just established to discover the unique ways leaders emerge, influence, and guide their employees and organizations. So, we are exploring some of the current leading concepts and look for the aspect of the theories we have discussed already. The leader member exchange theory which is called LMX, argue that because of the time pressure, leaders establish a special relationship with a small group of their followers. These individuals make up in the group, they are trusted and get a disproportionate amount of the leader's attentions and more likely to receive special privilege. Others followers falls into the out group. Alamed's theory proposed that the early in the history of interactions between a leader and the given follower, the leader implicitly categorized the follower as in or out. That relationships become relatively stable over time. Leaders include LMX by rewarding employees with whom they want to be closer linked and punishing those with whom they do not like. For the LMX relationships to remain intact, the leader and the follower must invest in the relationships. Just how the leaders choose who fall into the uh, category, each category is unclear, but there are evidence that in-group members has demographic, attitude and personality characteristics that are similar to those of their leaders or are higher of competence than our group members. We can see at this exhibit 13-2, we can see the in group subordinate A, B, and C. They are more helpfulness, trusted, and high interaction. And we can see the out group, the subordinate D, E, and F. They are very formal relationship with the leaders. What is the charismatic leaderships? Sociologist Max Weber defined charisma from the Greek word for gift as a certain quality of an individual's personality by virtue of which he or she is set apart from ordinary people and treated as endowed with supernatural, superhuman, or at least specifically exceptional powers of quality. There are four characteristics of a charismatic leaders. Number one, aversions and articulations has aversions expressed as the ideals goals that propose a future better than a status, uh, able to clarify the importance of the visions in terms that understandable to others. Number two is a personal risk, willing to take on a high personal risk, incur high costs, and engage in self sacrifice to achieve the versions. The number three is sensitivity to the follower needs, perspective for others' abilities, and responsive to their needs and feelings. And the last is unconventional behavior. Engage in a behavior that are perceived as a novel and counter to the norms. Are charismatic leaders born or made? Are charismatic leaders born with their qualities? Or can people learn to be a charismatic leaders? Yes and yes. Individuals are born with personality traits that makes them more charismatic on average. Personality is also related to the charismatic leaderships. Charismatic leaders are likely to be emotional, stable, and extroverted, although these traits are most likely to influence charismatic leaders' behavior in stressful and fast-changing environment. Consider the uh, bring out, uh, develop the aura of charisma. Use your passion to generate enthusiasm. Speak in an animated voice. Reinforce your message with the eye contact and facial expressions and gestures to emphasize. Bring out the potentials in following by tapping into their emotions and created a bonding with them. How do charismatic leaders influence the followers? By articulating and appealing visions, a long-term strategies to attain a goal by link the present with a better future for the organizations. Desirable visions fit the organization's circumstances and reflects the unique of the organizations. Thus, the follower are inspired not only by how passionate the leader communicating, there must be an underlying visions that appeal to the follower as well. A visions need an accompanying vision statement of formal articulation for an organization's visions or missions. Charismatic leaders may use vision statement to imprint the follower an overreaching goal and purpose. Through words and actions, the leader convey a new set of values and set an example for the followers to imitate. Thus, effective charismatic leadership depends on the situations. Charismatic leadership has positive effect across many contexts. However, there are characteristics of followers and of the situations that enhance or somewhat limit its effects. One factor that enhance charismatic leadership is stress. People are especially receive the charismatic leadership when they are sense a crisis or when they are under stress, perhaps because they think bold leaderships is needed at that situations. Unfortunately, charismatic leaderships who are larger than life doesn't, doesn't necessarily act in the best interest of their organizations. Research has shown that individuals who are narcissistic are also higher in some behavior associated with charismatic leaderships. Many charismatic but corrupt leaders have allowed their personal goals to override the goals of their organizations. Leaders at Enron, Tyco, WorldCom, and HealthSouth recklessly use organizational resources for their personal benefits and unethically violated law to inflate stock price and then cash in millions of dollars in a stock option. Some charismatic leaders, such as Hitler, are all too successful that convincing their followers to pursue distorted visions. In charisma is power, then the power can be used for good and for ill. It is not that charismatic leadership isn't effective. Overall, it is, but a charismatic leader isn't always the answer. Success depends on the some extent on the situation, on the leader's visions, and on the organization checks and balance in a place to monitor the outcomes. Charismatic leadership theory relies on leaders' ability to inspire followers to believe in them. In contrast, Fielder's model, situational leadership theory, and path goal theory describe transactional leaders who guide their followers toward established goal by clarifying rules and task requirements. A stream of research have focused on differentiating from transformational leaders who aspired followers to transit their self-interest for a good of the organization. Transformational leaders and their teams and organization perform well and can have extraordinary effect on their followers who respond with increased performance. Organizations citizenships behavior or CB, creativity, job satisfactions, mental health, and motivation. We can see at Exhibit 13-4, these are characteristics of transactional and transformational leaders. Exhibit 13-5 shows the full range of leadership models, which literally means let it be, do nothing. It the most passive and therefore least effective of leaders' behavior. Management by exceptions, active or passive, in which leader primarily put out fires when there are crisis exceptions to the normal procedure, means they are often too late to be effective. Evolution of transformation leaderships has been supported at diverse job level and occupations, but it isn't effective in all situations. It has a greater impact on the bottom line in smaller, privately held firms than in more complex organizations. Transformational versus tensional leaderships is more strongly correlated with a variety of workplace outcomes. In considering transformational and charismatic leadership, we are surely notice some commonalities. There are also differences. Charismatic leadership places somehow more emphasis on the way leaders communication. They are passionate and dynamic, while transformational leadership focuses more on what they are communicating. It is compelling visions. Still, the theories are more alike than different. At their heart, both focus on the leader ability to inspire followers, and sometimes they do also in the same way. Because of this, some researchers believe the concepts are somehow interchangeable. Now we discuss the number 5 objective on this chapter, which is we discussing the roles of leaders in creating ethical organizations. Although the theories we have discussed so far have increased our understanding of effective leadership, they do not deal explicitly with the rules of ethics and trust, which are perhaps essential to complete the picture. This and the theories we discussed earlier are not mutually exclusive ideas. A transformational leader may also be responsible one, but here we are consider compatibility concept that explicitly addressed the role of leaders in creating the ethical organizations. Authentic leaders who are knowing that they are and what they are believe, and they act on those values and beliefs openly and candidly. Their followers consider them ethically people and trust them as a result. Authentic leaders share informations, encourage open communications, and stick on their ideals. Authentic leaders are also humble Research indicates that the leader who model humility help followers to understand the growth process of their own development. Ethical and charismatic leadership intersect at a number of junctures. To integrated ethical and charismatic leadership, scholars have advised the ideas of socialized charismatic leaderships that conveying others-centered, not self-centered, value through leaders who model ethical conduct. These leaders are be able to bring employee values in line with their own values through their work and actions. Abusive supervision refers to the perceptions that a superior is hostile in their verbal and non-verbal behavior. This is negatively affect health, leads to increased depressions, emotional exhaustions, and job tension perceptions. It leads to decrease in organizational commitments, job satisfactions, and perceived organizational support along with increased work-family conflict. This can adversely affect employee performance and also with the other employee behavior. Servant leaders go beyond their self-interest and focus on opportunities to help followers grow and develop. Characteristic behavior including listening, empathizing, persuading, accepting situationships, and actively developing followers' potentials. Because servant leaderships focus on serving the needs of others, research has focused on its outcomes of the well-being of the followers. The last two of the objectives in this chapter is be able to describe how leaders can have a positive impact on their organizations through building a trust and mentoring. Trust is a physical state that exists when you are agree to make yourself vulnerable to another because you have a positive expectations about how things are going to turn out. Although you are not completely in control of the situation, you are willing to take a chance that the other person will come through for you. Trust is a primary attribute associated with leaderships. Breaking it has a serious adverse effect on a group performance. Followers who are trust a leader are confident that their rights and interests will not be abused. Trust between supervisor and employees has many specific advantages. There are four advantages from the research. Number one, trust encourage taking risks. Number two, trust facilitated information sharing. Number three, trust groups are more effective. And the number four, trust enhance productivity. From the exhibit 13 form 6, we can see uh, the integrity from the leader trustworthy refer to the honesty and truthfulness. The benevolence means the trusted person has your interest at heart, even your interest are not necessarily in line with her or his interests. The ability encompasses an individual technical and interpersonal knowledge skills. Effective leaderships is built on the trust of leaders and followers. Trust propensity refers to how likely a particular employee is to trust a leader. Some people are simply more likely to believe others can be trusted. Those who carefully document every promise and conversations with their superior are not very high in trust propensity, and they probably are not going to take a leader's words for anything. Those who think most people are basically honest and forthright will be more likely to seek evidence that their leaders have behaved in a trustworthy manner. Trust personality is closely linked to the personality trait of agreeableness, and the people with lower self-esteem are less likely to trust others. There are three trusts. One is trust and culture, the role of time and regarding trust. Leaders often take responsibility for developing future leaders. A mentor is a senior employee who sponsors and supports a less experienced employee, a protege. Successful mentors are a good teacher. They present ideas clearly, listen well, and empathize with protege's problems. Mentoring relationships serve careers and physical functions that we can see in this exhibit 13-7. The last objective in this chapter is to identify the challenges to our understanding of leaderships. Much of an organization's success or failure is due to the factor outside the influence of leaderships. In many cases, success or failure is just a matter of being in the right or wrong place at a given time. The attributions theory of leadership says that leadership is merely an attribution people make about other individuals. We attribute the following to leaders: intelligence, outgoing personality, strong verbal skill, aggressive understandings, and industrious. At the original level, we tend rightly or wrongly to see leaders as responsible for both extreme negative and extremely positive performance. One theory of leadership suggests that in many situations, leaders' actions are irrelevant. Experience and training are among the substitutes that can replace the need of a leader's support or ability to create structure. Naturalize make it impossible for leaders' behavior to make any difference of the follower. We can see at the exhibit 13-18 the defining characteristic: relationships-oriented leaderships and the task-oriented leaderships for the individual, job, and organizations. The process organizations go through to fill management position is an exercise in the identification of effective leaders. It might begin by reviewing the knowledge, skills, and the ability needed to do the job effectively. Personal tasks can be identified traits associated with leaderships, extraversion, concentratiousness, and openness to experience. High self-monitor are better at reading situation and adjusting their behavior accordingly. Candidate with a high emotional intelligence (EI) should be have an advantage, especially in situations that requiring transformational leaderships. Organizations mostly spend a lot of money on leadership training and developments. How can managers get the most from their leadership training budgets? First, leadership training is likely to be more successful with the high self monitors. Such individuals have the flexibility to change their behavior. Second, organization can teach implementing skills. Third, skill as a trust building and monitoring can be taught. Leaders can be taught situational analysis skills. They can learn how to evaluate situations, modify them to match their style more closely, and assess which leader behavior might be the most effective in given situations. The effectiveness of leadership training seems to high much on the outside characteristics than other types of training. They are more close or technical, such as a computer software skills training. The number four, behavior training through modeling exercise can increase an individual's ability to exhibit charismatic leadership quality. Research also indicated that leaders should engage in regularly reviewing their leadership after key organization events as part of their development. Finally, leaders can be trained in transformational leadership skills that have bottom line results. From this chapter, we can summarize that leaderships play a central part in understanding group behavior because it's the leader who usually directs us towards our goals. Knowing what makes a good leader should be valuable towards improving group performance. The Big Five personality framework shows strong and consistent relationships between personality and leaderships. There are five implications for managers. One, for maximum leadership effectiveness, ensure that preference on the initiating structure and consideration dimensions are matched for your work dynamic and culture. Number two, hire candidates who are exhibit transformational leadership quality and who have demonstrated success in working through others to meet the long-term vision. Personality tests can reveal candidates higher in extraversion, concentrations, and openness, which are indicated leadership readiness. Number three, hire candidates whom you believe are ethically and trustworthy for the management roles and train current manager in your organization's ethically standards to increase leadership effectiveness and reduce abusive supervision. Number four, seek to develop trusting relationship with followers because as organizations have become less stable and predictable, strong bonds of trust are replacing bureaucratic rules in defining expectations and relationships. Lastly, number five, consider investing in leadership training such as a formal course, workshop, and mentoring.